we want this to be an informative, an educational session. Certainly we're going to show you ScanStar and give you some information about that product specifically. But before we do that, really why is it important, and why do organizations even bother with asset management, and more specifically, why do they bother with barcode scanning? Well, I think barcode scanning, there's a number of reasons, and there's a number of values that it brings to the table, one of which is data integrity, right? If you can imagine with a barcode scanner having the ability to scan the barcode, at that point, you're almost entirely alleviating the human error of incorrectly typing in an asset tag or a serial number. So that in itself is huge, having accurate information in your configuration management database. And then the other aspect of it is that barcode scanning solutions typically shorten the learning curve because, one, you're not having to go in through the normal CMDB interface to enter this information. You're doing it through an abbreviated UI, and it's very intuitive to utilize. So it does make it easier for staff to enter this information and keep it up to date. And then cost effective. The solutions nowadays are very easy to implement, and so the expense of having to deploy a long implementation, those are really days of past, and so it's very cost effective to implement this type of solution. The versatility, I think in general, when you talk about the CMDB and you talk about the things that you can maintain within that CMDB, it really varies, from servers and laptops and desktops and mobile devices to all types of things like chairs. We have customers that utilize barcode scanning for fleet management and tracking sensitive mail, items and things of that nature. So the versatility is there. It's really as long as you can, put a barcode, print that with a document or put that on a device, you're really opening up the door in terms of how you can use barcode scanning. And then increasing the productivity, and I think that really ties in to the fact of the short learning curve, and just the fact that this is much easier than having to manually type all of this information in. So certainly it does increase the productivity, and not to mention the fact of just populating the CMDB. But once you have the data in the CMDB, just the fact that you have this and now you have visibility to this information, that in itself will increase productivity. So other areas where we see, we talked about data integrity, but in general, just better data. When you do a scan of a barcode with a product like ScanStar, you're able to see much more than just simply the serial number of the asset tag. You can see the manufacturer, who that asset belongs to, who's responsible for it, the manufacturer, the model number, all of those types of data elements. So you got quite a bit of data available to you right there with a handheld device. And then the availability, so certainly it is a mobile device, so it certainly makes it very accessible to the users. And then certainly you would still have access to this data also from the native application user interface. And then ultimately, one of the reasons that we're going down this path of CMDB is so that we can make better decisions. And these decisions range from everything from change management scenarios where we're thinking about applying an application or applying a patch set to a server and understanding what it might impact, to decisions, financial decisions. How many assets have we lost over a period of time? How many assets have walked out the door? Those types of things. So you've got, this certainly is keeping all of this data up to date so that you can analyze the data, so that you can understand your environment, understand how assets are being utilized, and, things like retention rates, all those types of things. So again, these are some of the reasons that barcode scanning has really, has gained momentum over the past few years. Moving on, let's talk a little bit about different types of barcodes, and this is actually where I want to leverage the knowledge and expertise of Brett Winston. So Brett, can you tell me a little bit about the different types of barcodes and what applications those have?
Absolutely. What you see, I guess, going from left to right, is sort of a history, if you will. The one-dimensional barcode. This is, you all no doubt are familiar with the 1D barcode. You see these on your grocery items. The very familiar UPC barcode. These are also the barcodes that generally we use for asset management. The 1D barcode was actually in use back in the 1940s, and it's called 1D because it's scanned horizontally. You've got these vertical lines; they vary in thickness, they vary in the spacing between them, and of course that yields to a scanning device a unique identifier, a number, or a string, I should say, of characters, numbers, and letters. In the case of what we're doing with ScanStar, what we're doing is we're just marrying a unique identifier to a whole set of data, like Ron mentioned before, where we've got this unique identifier that gives us reference to a manufacturer, a model, an owner, a location, and cost information, and just basically anything you want to tie to it. All you really need is just a short little string of characters that represents that set of data. So this is the most common barcode for us, anyway, in the asset management discipline. And so that's what we support mostly. Now we do support 2D barcodes as well. The one in the middle there, the PDF 417, is a very common 2D barcode. In fact, I believe, and I heard this and I didn't confirm it, I should have, that Dell is now putting 2D barcodes on their equipment. I'm sure if any of you are experienced with Dell, you've seen their service labels or service tags, and they're barcoded. I believe they're now shipping with 2D barcodes, and I'm pretty sure they're PDF 417. Our product does support that along with many other types of barcodes, but specifically that 2D barcode we support. So what's the difference between the 1D and the 2D? Well, as you might expect, 1D being horizontal, 2D is vertical and horizontal. And you have the ability then with a 2D barcode to have a much greater amount of information stored in the tag itself. So where a 1D barcode tag just gives me a string of numbers or a string of characters that I can associate, I can actually put a lot of that data into the barcode in a 2D barcode. We don't currently leverage that technology, and there's some pros and cons there, and I won't get into that today, but certainly we can later. And then specifically among the 2D barcodes, no doubt you've seen the QR code and very likely the data matrix. Data matrix being more of a kind of an industrial, or you see it on the postal service.
UPS
I believe uses
packages.
UPS, postal, delivery type scenarios. The QR code is more of a commercial thing, and you've probably, I'm guessing, just about everybody out there has scanned a QR code with their smartphone at some point, if only just to see, hey, what happens when I do this? And that, of course, holds a bunch of information, and oftentimes it takes you to a website, so you can then learn more about what the advertiser has got to offer. So there's the 1D and the 2D, and then finally there's the RFID, and that's a technology different altogether, where everything to the left is optical. We need a reader that can see and interpret that black and white tag. The RFID is actually radio frequency identification, and there's a couple different types, and I'm probably just going to go on and on here, so I better check myself. Let's just say there's passive and there's active RFID. One is less expensive and a little bit we'll say less robust than the other, and that would be the passive. But essentially what we do is we wake up the passive RFID tag, and it reports back to us with via radio frequency radio waves. And that is something we're headed in that direction with ScanStar. So I think I've probably gone a little bit too deep into types of barcodes, but more than happy to answer further questions in the future if you like.
Yeah, no, this is good. So you'd mentioned that the one-directional barcodes is predominantly what ScanStar is supported as of today. Can you talk about maybe a little bit on the futures of what where we see the most opportunity? You mentioned smartphones with two-dimensional barcodes. Can you talk a little bit about maybe where we're going in terms of what ScanStar might look like in the future?
Absolutely. The possibilities are endless, especially with the 2D barcodes and the QR codes, for instance, and the ability to query and get back a bunch of information from a particular tag. Now, it doesn't necessarily lend itself well in an asset management scenario, but you mentioned the smartphones, and we've got a lot of people have asked, does ScanStar support smartphones, the iOS and the Android, et cetera? And we don't currently, but we do have plans on the table for a native client on these smartphones, because there just seems to be that demand out there. Now, there's some pros and cons there we don't necessarily have to get into right now. They use a camera rather than for instance, a laser beam in order to acquire that tag, and that can be a little bit unwieldy. But you trade that maybe 2 or 3 or 4 second capture time versus for a smartphone versus a half a second capture time for a laser. You trade that for a reduced cost and a wider availability of the hardware, right? So pretty much everybody's got a smartphone if you choose to use consumer devices for your asset management, then you've got the hardware side covered more than likely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to know, and we appreciate that explanation. So I'm sure we'll have some more questions throughout the presentation. And by the way, for those of you that do have questions, we are not going to be opening up the audio lines just for background noise and those types of reasons. However, you should notice a Q&A portion on the panel on the right-hand side of your monitor. Feel free to type any questions that you might have there, and we will take a few moments here at the end of the presentation to answer those as much as we possibly can, at least. All right. So, well, thank you. So, getting into ScanStar specifically, a couple of things to point out. ScanStar is, so for those of you that maybe have been around the RightStar product sets for quite some time, ScanStar was a rewrite from an old product called Magic Wand, right? And in ScanStar, it does support a number of BMC solutions. So one of those being the BMC Remedy Force, as well as the Footprints Service Core. So these are currently the two integrations that are supported by RightStar as of today. However, in the near future, we are planning to have an integration with Footprints Asset Core. So there are a number of customers out there that don't have Service Core, they're using Asset Core from the financial management perspective and asset lifecycle management perspective, and so they prefer to have that integration with Asset Core. So look for that. That'll be coming, in the near future, and maybe Brett, towards the end, you can kind of talk maybe about some timelines, things like that. And then also, for those of you that maybe are utilizing the Remedy ITSM solution, we'll have a version for that as well. But today, Remedy Force as well as the Footprints Service Core, both of those are supported, and both of those absolutely update the configuration, their respective configuration management database platform.